Today I'm going to demonstrate how to go about making and fitting the bridle, which is a very small component that controls the reed. Now, having said that, it's a very important component because it can make the difference between a reed behaving well and behaving badly. So I use this copper sheet, and it's 0.5, half a millimetre thick. It's probably I don't know if it's used much anymore, but it was used for copper flashing on roofs and that. So you might be able to get some in a builder suppliers. Now, the first thing I do is I mark out and cut a strip that's 32 millimeters wide. So I'll just get my marker here and mark it there, and down, and mark it down here. Now, there's no great precision here. You know, if it ends up being 31 mil or 33 mil, it'll still do the job. In fact, I cut the strip that is going to be probably in most cases a little bit longer than necessary, but you can always shorten it. So mark down that here, 32 millimeters, top to bottom, and I'm going to cut it now using this little jeweler's snips, as it's called. Now, if you happen to have if you happen to have one of these, which is more your kind of a hardware shop tin snips that you'd find in a lot of fellas' toolboxes, I suppose, it'll do the job. So whatever, but if you're going to have to buy a pair of snips, I would recommend you buy the smaller ones, because it's just kind of more in proportion with the work we're doing here. And that's the first step. The next thing then is to mark out for cutting your bridles. Now, to be honest, I've made so many at this stage that I don't bother measuring anymore. So I'm going to cut off this bit on the top anyway to get that straight, and then I just kind of move down along and mark again, and move down along and mark again. Now, what I'm using here is engineer's square, and it's 100 millimeters that way. It's a small one, which is very handy. But you don't have to, if you can find anything that will give you a straight line, for example a school triangle there from a geometry set, that'll do the job too. Another thing you might have to hand is a saw, and these plastic handle saws always have a right angle here for if you want to mark when you're cutting a bit off a plank, so you could use that. And if you happen to have an old-fashioned carpenter square, that will do the job too. It's kind of on the big side, but as I say, it will do the job fine. Now, I'm not actually measuring here, but the optimum width for the strip using this material is about 4.5 millimeters. Now, to be honest with you, it's not that critical. Anything between 4 millimeters and 5 millimeters will work well. So you don't have to be super accurate with your measuring. And you can mark out the whole strip if you like. And as I say, this bit here, it's just, I'm cutting that off just to get a straight edge. What's helpful is if you cut your strip in this direction. And then turn it around and cut it in this direction. So you're sort of alternating directions. Then if you feel the strip, one side has sort of raised wire edges and the other side doesn't. So when we're putting it on the reed, if we put the side without the edges onto the reed, it won't kind of be scratching the cane, and it'll be easier to move it up and down. So that bit there is ready now, and the next stage is to make the loop. So I just kind of flatten it out with an ordinary pliers. Again, it doesn't have to be very precise. And then I make the loop with an oval nail. This nail is about 2 millimeters plus. And now if you wanted to, if you're starting off and you're not sure, you could mark the center, which is 16 millimeters. But again, when you get used to it, you can just do it by eye. And again, there's no great precision required, because if one side ends up a little bit longer than the other, you usually have to shorten one or both sides anyway. So I'm just going to wrap that around the nail. Now I've made the top end of the loop there roughly, so I put in the nail and grab a hold of it and squeeze it down onto the nail, so it's a nice neat little loop. And then when I've done that, I use a small cross-cut screwdriver, a slotted screwdriver, and I'm gonna so that's my loop formed. Now the next stage is just to get it roughly into the shape. So this is a piece of steel that's 20 millimeters in diameter, but it's anything approximating to that that you can find, even at the sweeping brush handle or whatever will do fine. So I'm putting this down there, and just to point out that the sharp edges are on the outside now. And I can just tap it in there. Tap it in there. Now, I have a reed here and it's ready for the bridle. I've scraped it down and sanded it so it's got a crow. So I offer up the bridle to it, and it's fitting quite snugly there. Now this side is a little bit long, so I'll shorten that side. Okay, that looks more even. Now the important thing when you're folding, making the, how would you call it, the shoulder or whatever, the kink, is to make the kink a little bit wide. In other words, like that is where the edge of the reed is, but come out a little bit, half a millimeter from there. Again, I wouldn't usually mark it, but for the purposes of demonstration, so that it looks like the bridle is a little bit too wide for the reed. And then you put her in there and make a nice bend in it. Okay, and then kind of looking at the other side, do the same thing, I'm just kind of eyeing the distance from the loop to the edge there and bending that there too. So I have something like this, and that should be able to slip in over the reed like that, and it'll be quite loose. I don't want it tight at this stage. So when I have it at that stage and I've kind of started the kink, I can then get my little pliers and start bending it around the reed. Like so. Now it's up a little bit from the binding, because I like to have the bridle that I have the option of moving it up or down, because that gives you an awful lot of adjustment on the reed. So I'm just going to, I can see there it's far too open, so I'll start tightening it in. And I'm watching what's happening at the tip of the reed. That's better. So the final thing then, when you have it and you're happy enough with it, it's just, this is where the loop comes into its own. I can just grab that loop there and pull it in, and that makes for a very secure bridle. But it's also, I can still tweak it up or tweak it down just a hair, literally 0.1, 0.2 of a mil, and that gives me a lot of adjustment. I can move it down.